You're not good enough. You always mess this up. No one really cares what you have to say. You've heard this voice before. It doesn't scream. It doesn't need to, because it knows exactly where to whisper. Right when you're about to try something new. Right after you make a mistake. Right before you look in the mirror. It's quiet, but devastating. And here's the hardest part. That voice, it sounds just like you. We grow up fearing the judgment of others, friends, parents, strangers. But the truth is, no one has shaped your self-worth more than that voice inside your own mind. The inner critic. It's the one who keeps you from starting, who tells you that you're behind, who insists that you'll never be enough. But where did it come from? Why is it so loud, even when you've done nothing wrong? And more importantly, what can you do about it? In this video, we're not going to silence the critic. We're going to understand it. Because once you see it for what it is, not who you are, something powerful happens. You stop living by its script and start writing your own. The birth of the inner critic. No one is born with a voice telling them they're not enough. Babies don't question their worth. They don't hesitate to cry when they need comfort or smile when they feel joy. They don't feel shame when they fall while learning to walk. So where does that voice come from? The one that whispers, "You're a failure," or "Why even try?" The truth is, it's not something we're born with. It's something we absorb. As children, we begin to construct a sense of self based on the responses we receive from the world around us. Praise teaches us what is good. Criticism, especially when harsh or unpredictable, teaches us to fear being wrong. And over time, when those external voices are repeated enough, they stop sounding like other people and start sounding like us. Sometimes, the inner critic is the voice of a parent who meant well, but demanded perfection. Sometimes, it's a teacher who humiliated you in front of the class. Sometimes, it's society itself telling you what beauty, success, or intelligence should look like. To protect ourselves, we internalize those voices. We start judging ourselves before others can. We believe that if we can be hard enough on ourselves, we can stay safe from rejection or failure. At its core, the inner critic is a survival tool. It tells you to stay small so you won't stand out, to play it safe so you won't be hurt, to prepare for failure so it doesn't destroy you when it comes. It's trying to protect you, but in doing so, it shrinks you. And the tragedy is that, while its voice may have once been an echo of someone else's expectations, it eventually becomes your own. You stop needing anyone to judge you. You've already learned how to do it better than anyone ever could. The psychology behind the voice. To truly understand the inner critic, we need to understand the mind that created it. The inner critic doesn't arise from nowhere. It's the product of deep psychological patterns, shaped by experiences, memory, and emotion. And most of all, it's learned. Psychologists refer to a concept called self-schemas, the mental frameworks we build to define who we are. These schemas are often formed early in life, based on the roles we're given, the feedback we receive, and the environments we grow up in. If you were constantly told to try harder, be quiet, or get it right, your self-schema might be rooted in the belief that you're never enough, unless you're perfect. Now, combine that with something else: negative automatic thoughts. These are the mental reflexes that pop up without invitation. You spill coffee and hear, "Of course you did. You always mess things up." You see someone succeed and think, "You'll never be that good." The mind repeats these thoughts so often they become background noise, like an emotional algorithm that keeps recommending self-doubt. And there's another layer, the internal conflict between your inner critic and your inner child. The critic says, "Don't be weak," but the child says, "Please see me." The critic says, "You should have done better." The child says, "I did my best." This tug of war plays out every day between the part of you that learned to protect and the part of you that still longs to be loved without conditions. Here's the kicker. The inner critic isn't always wrong. Sometimes it does notice flaws or urges you to grow, but it doesn't know how to speak with kindness. It uses fear instead of encouragement, punishment instead of patience. And when that's the only voice you hear, day after day, it becomes harder to distinguish fear from fact, criticism from truth, self-protection from self-sabotage. But once you begin to notice it, really notice it, you gain something powerful. The choice to respond, to question, to interrupt, to choose a different voice. Real-life patterns. How the inner critic shows up. The inner critic doesn't always yell. Sometimes it shows up dressed as discipline. Other times, it hides behind silence. You won't always notice it right away because it doesn't always sound cruel. It often sounds familiar, practical, logical, even responsible. Don't apply for that job. You're not ready. You're not smart enough to speak in that meeting. No one wants to hear your story. And because the voice sounds like your own, you believe it. Not because it's true, but because you've heard it for so long, you've stopped questioning it. Take Ava, a talented writer who never submits her work. She says she's just being realistic, waiting until it's perfect. But beneath that perfectionism is fear. A fear fed by a voice that says, if you put it out there, people will see you're not good enough. Or Jordan, who hesitates to reach out to friends when he's struggling. The voice tells him, don't be a burden. So he isolates himself, not because no one cares, but because the critic convinced him he doesn't deserve care. And maybe you felt it too, after a mistake. You hear, how could you be so stupid? Even when the mistake was small, even when it didn't matter. That's the thing about the inner critic. It doesn't measure proportion. It doesn't consider context. It attacks first and asks nothing later. And slowly it begins to shape your behavior. You start playing small. You stop raising your hand. You overthink every message. You apologize for existing. Not because the world told you to, but because your own mind has become your gatekeeper. But here's the truth. The critic is loudest where you're most afraid. And often, the area it attacks most viciously is the part of you that is most sacred. How to respond, not react. The inner critic doesn't disappear when you shout at it. It doesn't go silent when you ignore it. In fact, the more you resist it, the louder it often becomes. Because your inner critic doesn't need more punishment. It needs understanding. You see, this voice wasn't born out of malice. It was born out of fear. It was shaped by moments where love felt conditional, where safety depended on being good, and where mistakes weren't met with grace, but with shame. So the goal isn't to fight the voice. It's to reframe your relationship with it. Start by naming it. Give it a name that separates it from you. Call it the perfectionist, or the protector, or even little voice. The point is not to mock it, but to recognize, this is not the full truth of who I am. This is just one part of my mind speaking. Then, practice compassionate reframing. When the voice says, you're such a failure, respond with, I made a mistake, but I'm still learning, and I'm allowed to grow. This isn't toxic positivity. This is emotional realism. You're not denying the truth. You're adding kindness to it. Because growth doesn't require shame. It requires safety. Another powerful tool comes from acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, a method called cognitive diffusion. Instead of fusing with the thought, "I'm not good enough," you step back and say, "I'm having the thought that I'm not good enough." That one phrase creates distance. It reminds you, you are the thinker, not the thought. And that's where your power begins. And finally, give the critic what it never learned to give you, a calm, compassionate boundary. You can say, "Thank you for trying to protect me, but I'm choosing a different voice now." Because healing doesn't mean never hearing the critic again. It means no longer mistaking it for truth. And every time you choose compassion over cruelty, presence over panic, curiosity over judgment, you quiet that voice just a little more, not by silencing it, but by leading it. The inner critic may never go away completely, but it doesn't have to be the loudest voice in the room anymore. Because now you see it for what it is. A story you were taught, a defense you once needed, a voice that doesn't get to define your worth. You are not lazy. You are not unlovable. You are not broken. You are becoming. Every time you choose kindness toward yourself, you're rewiring your brain. Every time you speak gently instead of harshly, you're reshaping your story. And every time you show up, even with fear, you're reclaiming the space the critic once ruled. So the next time that voice whispers, "You're not enough," pause, breathe, and say, "That's just a thought, not a prophecy." Because the truth is, you were never meant to be perfect. You were meant to be whole. And wholeness begins when you stop fighting the voice inside and start leading it forward with love.